Today we're going to cover material from the tutorial series. The URL again is here. We're going to start on the TSX part. Hopefully we'll get to rich events and testing because that's a pretty cool way of this stay in the flow workflow that I'm trying to show with TDD. If we don't, that's okay. Each one of these steps has a full treatment and full video online, and you can come back to us later and ask questions. As a note, said this last time, this tutorial was written at the beginning of the year. It used Create React App from the beginning of the year, just after they did the big merger to have TypeScript support directly in Create React App. Lots has changed since then. I need to go back and update the tutorial. Out of the box, they switched the TypeScript stuff to functional components, to ESLint, and then multiple revisions of the ESLint support, and then some other things. So yeah, I need to update it. Haven't yet. And this is what we're going to start with. Today, I'm going to do more cutting and pasting of code from off screen, just so we can speed up a little bit. I'll do some direct typing to show autocomplete and things like that, but I want to get through a bunch of these concepts. So I've already done this part to clean up my app.test.tsx to have two simple tests to see if the whole thing exists and if there's a heading. And I changed it back to a class-based component that has nothing more than an H1 in it. Over to our good friend WebStorm. Here it is. I'm in what I talked about last time, TDD mode. This is a signal to my brain that I'm in a good workflow. I'm under control. I'm doing test first development. What is the signal? When my code is on the left and my test is on the right, and my visual test runner is at the bottom. I happen to turn off tabs, turn off almost all the Chrome, and use other ways to navigate between each of these two panes and between other files. I know that the test runner is working because if I put in a change and save, it runs and fails. And I said this last time, again, WebStorm people, good job on parsing the test runner, the jest output, and putting that little console background color thingy to show the exact character that's wrong. Put it back, I save, test run and pass. I feel good about myself. We're off to the races. So let me talk about, again, where we're going to be starting. I'm going to be starting from the spot. And in this tutorial step, we're going to be showing a little bit about TSX, meaning JSX, and some of the ES6 features. And we're going to parameterize this heading, make it into kind of a component that can be passed a value. So we're going to talk first about TypeScript, classes, and fields. Let me go back to the IDE. And so, for example, maybe I want to take this and extract it to a value that's inserted. So I'll do extract to, now I'm just going to cut and paste it because it's not going to put it where I want it. I'm going to put it inside the render function. I'm going to say const label equals hello React. And then in here, I'm going to refer to it and I get the autocomplete, blah, blah, blah. And I've moved it up to there and I know that this is going to work. I'm going to hit save. I haven't really changed the public interface of this. But I could also extract this to a field and make it part of the class. I didn't make an, oop. And I'm going to call this label and it'll be private. So it's up there. I'll get rid of this and I'll say this.label and my tests still pass. I get autocomplete, all that stuff. And so I'm now kind of taken that part of the feature and put it into something that could be changed via subclassing and things like that. But what we really want to do is get into React and prompts as the way of customizing. So the first ES6 feature we want to talk about is arrow functions, and I'm going to do kind of an alert as an arrow function on this as the thing to illustrate arrow functions. So let's say I wanted to make it so that when I clicked on the H1, I got an alert. So my first stab at this would be on click instead of on the normal HTML, it's the JSX capitalization. And I hit expand or hit tab, it's going to give me the curly brackets. And so I'm going to go ahead and type in hello world. And from the concept of fail faster, this was something talked about previously. I want to do TDD so I can fail faster. I don't want to have to ship to the browser, hit reload, or even worse, have my customers report my bug for me. I want the tests to fail. Well, when you're using TypeScript, you fail even faster, but I haven't even run the test yet, and TypeScript let me know that I failed. How did I fail? It's giving me an error message from the TypeScript compiler. And what it's saying is the output of this expression doesn't match what OnClick was expecting to have. And that's because this is immediately evaluated. It's not something that's going to be evaluated later when the OnClick actually happens. So in this case, it's telling me exactly what my problem is. And I can go and fix it using this thing called an arrow function. And in ES6, an arrow function is a small anonymous inline function that's now used everywhere. So you've probably already seen it. I won't talk too much about it. So with this arrow function to the rescue thing, I've got the alert going. What does this change do? It stores it anonymously in scope. If I save it and I've got my start script is running over here, I go over to my browser and I click in it and I get the hello world. All is good, right? Wrong. In modern React, they discourage using arrow functions in the render function, in the body of the JSX. Why? Because it becomes a performance hit. All of those are going to be reevaluated on every render, which might be 60 frames a second. And you're creating and destroying a JavaScript function 60 times a second. So what do they want you to do? They want you to have a handler for this, and then call the handler instead so that the function is declared once, in our case, as a, in the beginning at least, as a method. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to extract this to a method on the class app, and I'm going to name it handle click. And the way this will actually work is it's no longer an arrow function. So I'm going to get rid of the arrow function like this. And then I've got this handle click. I'm going to generate it as private. I'm going to leave it as private. People may differ about whether that's the right thing to teach. With this in mind, we referenced this .handle click, but we didn't call it. Why? It's going to be called later when the click actually happens. And so the alert, we want to change this to this .label to reference the field that we defined up here. When we do this and go back to the browser, go ahead and open up the console. When I click on it, I get a mile-long traceback saying, couldn't find label of undefined. Pay attention to this next part because it's kind of the whole point of this tutorial step. This is not the this you thought it was. We are in a method which would make you think this was bound to this, but it's not. Let's follow the flow along. The onClick is called, this expression is called, and passed an argument. That argument is the event information for the event that was generated, including the element that it was handled on. Therefore, this is bound to the event, not the prototype instance, the class instance, if you want to refer to it that way. How can we fix that? Well, we could put in this. And then we would have to do a call here. And now when I come back and click, I get the right thing. But I just told you the powers that be have passed a papal edict. You shouldn't use arrow functions in here. So what are we going to do? Let's put it back the way it was. Let's do something weird. I'll leave that as private. Let's change this from a method to a field or an attribute that is bound to an arrow function. Kind of a weird thing. It's not really a method anymore, but it is a callable that will be passed an argument, and we'll talk about that in a second. Now, when I save this, go back, click, I get the right thing. It's a weird pattern. Maybe it's changed in the last 4 months, like the entire universe of JavaScript. But when I was writing it, this seemed to be a good mediation of that issue. You can get every side of every opinion in the world of JavaScript and React and TypeScript and stuff. I did see some people saying that that whole you should avoid anonymous functions isn't that big of a deal because the JavaScript interpreters have gotten to be so awesome that they can handle that with no sweat. But I'll go ahead and show that anyway. So the alert works in our browser again. But what we want to do now is try and get into putting a little bit of typing on things. And we'll get into that in the next step. So I'm going to go on to the next step. Let's see here. Going to go on to the next step. We did all of this. We moved it to a method. This is just some talking about things like class name and stuff like that. So I will go on to the next step. But before I do, Katerina, do we have anything?
Yes, we have actually one request and one question. So
Great.
First, can you please turn on the plugin that shows the shortcuts that you're using?
I should have done that. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. I do so many of these webinars, and out of the 50 things I have to do, turning off all the stuff up here, I always do 49 of them and I forget one of them, and this is the one I forgot. So now, from now on, when I do things like this, you're going to see the key that I'm pressing. Okay, next.
Yeah, and the question, I know you were expecting that. The question is, why did you use Enzyme over React testing library, since the
Yes,
last
good
one
point.
ships with the Create React app?
Right, good point. At the end of going into, we'll say Q4 of last year, what was then called React Testing Library from Kent Dodds was a little bit of a new thing, and Enzyme was a little bit of an old thing, and it's the thing that I had been using, and I wrote this tutorial to use Enzyme. Since then, like happens every twice a year in the world of React, everyone moved on to the next thing. That next thing is, let me bring it up. Something called the testing library. It's no longer React testing library. It covers more than just React, but it has special support for React. The testing library is now considered the official thing, and Create React app. Katerina, you told me that the latest switched to out-of-the-box support for testing library?
Yeah, that's right.
All right. And that's good because in my Gatsby project, I also switched to testing library, and the Zen that it has, which is the more your tests resemble the actual way it's used, the better. And I've really adopted that Zen. So that was a good point that was made by the questioner. Thank you. Does that cover it?
Yes, thanks.
Okay, so we're going on to the next part. As prep, we're going to put things back the way that it was. I will go ahead and copy this just to save myself a little typing. That was the entire render method. Take out the handle click. Take out that. Oop. Yeah, I did want that. Save, make sure that my tests run correctly. All right, good. So in this tutorial step, we are going to switch from a class-based component to a function-based component. And then later we're going to be switching back to a class-based component to do state. We're going to do a stateless functional component using TypeScript and then gradually build in things like interfaces for the props that come in. So we're going to go back to a simple, just an H1. We're going to make a tiny component. We're going to take this and turn it into a child component, a presentation component, where the app is the parent component or the container component. And along the way, we're going to start moving some policies into this heading component, such as a dynamically driven value so that you can say hello and pass the name in that you want to say hello to. And then we're going to add an event handler onto the heading component. Let's get into TDD mode and write a test first. So in my test for app, I'm going to write a test that sees if heading works. Well, it doesn't even exist yet, so it's going to fail. Now, how is it going to fail? I haven't hit save yet, and so the tests haven't run yet. As soon as the tests run, they're going to say, heading, don't know what that is. But fail faster has already helped me. The IDE is telling me that I've got a symbol that is going to fail. So now when I save, my tests run, and good news, I failed, just like I expected. A failing test, and then we go over and make a implementation, the test pass, and then we wire the implementation into the parent component and the test pass. That's kind of the workflow. Fail, succeed, succeed. So I'm going to take this. I want this H1 to be a standalone component. Pay attention to this. I'm going to do a brief moment of WebStorm dazzling you. This is so cool. So I'm going to first extract this to a functional component. Ooh, component. Ooh, here. Extract a component. And I'm going to call this heading. And I'm going to say, make it a functional component. And it's going to put into this file a functional component of heading. In my tutorial, I have a style which is using an ES6 arrow function. So instead, I'm going to do an extract, and I'm going to say const, and I want to export it. Export const heading equal, and then I want to, and I'll come back later and insert the use of the heading. This says it's not used, but that's a little bit of a lie. It's used over here. The tests still fail because I haven't imported, but I can now let the IDE fix that problem for me. And now when I do a save, let's see, my tests pass on the one that I just wrote, but my test fails on, let's see, on rendering the heading from the app, which is normal. So I can come back here and I can fix that by saying heading. Now when I save, all my tests will pass. And I've just done, is that right? Oh, because I'm not doing mount. I was doing a shallow component that didn't get the subcomponents. So good, I'm back. I've kind of done a refactoring, and that's the zen of React. You do this a bunch, you extract components, and the IDE can help you on that. The parent is now pointed at the child component, and so that's good. And all of our tests pass, and so that's good. But we have violated something from React, and now I think most of the major front-end frameworks, the single responsibility principle. One component, one file, usually one default export. I've got two components in this file, and I've got a test that tests two different components. Let's go through the process of extracting this component to its own file so that we can obey the single responsibility principle. I could cut and paste, go over to make a new file, put the correct imports in, come back to this file, remove from here, and then generate the import. But what if the IDE could do it for me? This is pretty cool. Move. I want to move this to heading.tsx. Watch all the things it does for me. Yes, I do want a new file called heading.tsx. Yes, I do want it in version control. Look, it generated the correct import for me. Now I've got a warning over here about, let's see. And I think that's actually a TypeScript thing. I don't think that's our fault. So if I Get rid of that. Yep, that's the TypeScript thing. And my test pass. Moreover, if I go back to my app, let's see what it did. No, you did the same thing. If I go to the TypeScript tool and restart you, then it goes away. So not our fault. Along the way, it generated the import for me in the place I extracted it from. And that can be a big help. All of this sequence of extracting a component to a file, etc. Now, I've got over here in my test, this is testing the heading file, not the app file. So I'm going to delete that. I'm going to make a new file called heading.test.tsx. I'll paste this in. Notice how it generated the imports for me. And let's see, so I'm going to put something in so that the text that I have of test, fix it, and it saves. Now my test pass, and I can go back to app.test.text and clean up that import with optimized imports. So I just went through the process of taking what is going to be a richer subcomponent out of a parent container component and moving it to a dumb presentational component. One last thing that I can do, I'm going to go back over to my heading test and then have my heading. Actually, I navigate not by file, but by symbol. So navigate by symbol, and I start typing heading so I don't have to remember where my files are. So I've got a functional component here, but I haven't done anything to let TypeScript know the type of this thing, that it's a functional component. I'll bet it thinks it's a JSX element or something like, yeah, JSX element. Well, that's kind of like the return value, but that's not what this thing is. What it really is a functional component from React. So I notice what I did. I did not go, oh God, this is a functional component. Go scroll to the top of the file, find the right import. Oh, it's a curly brace because it's not the default import. What was the name of it? Oh my God, now I got to go find where I was. And now my flow is blown. I've forgotten what I was doing. Let the IDE do all that for you. F, C, enter. And up at the top of the file, it has done the right import from the right place on the right line for you. Now, when I scroll over this and I'm holding down Command on Mac OS. I think it might be Control on Windows, and it tells me what the IDE thinks is the type of the symbol that is under the cursor. So I'm holding down Command, I move on top of a symbol, and it says this is a React functional component. Yay, it's the right thing. Why did I do that? Later on, knowing that it's a functional component will help us in typing situations and save us from mistakes and help us fail faster. I will stop at that point and see if we have any questions.
Yes, we have a very great question. Do you have any tips to help people getting into TDD mindset when coding? Honestly, I often miss the big picture and I get things done by trying and progressively improving. I'd love to get that methodic, but I haven't been successful so far. So any tips on that?
I agree. That is a great question. And in the audience, we may have some people with some better ideas than me. Audience, if you have some good tips for getting into the TDD flow and staying in the TDD flow, post them, and Ekaterina will read them out, and we can all learn from each other a little bit. This is Ekaterina, can I complain a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Go on.
Gatsby. So I maintain this site, the guide, is a big Gatsby site. And I maintain it. And I do a lot of Gatsby development. And the last thing on earth I want to do is type, save, wait for a rebuild, run the build, wait for the rebuild, hope it builds the right thing, and then reload a browser and pray for the best. So TDD is my defense against some of the things in Gatsby. But what hits me that I always make the mistake on is I start too big. I get into a test and the unit that I'm trying to test requires the universe. What I really need to do a better job of is starting with the leaves, the teeny tiniest things that are part of the component that I'm trying to do. And even if it seems like overkill and I'm creating tens and tens of single responsibility principal files, it gives me confidence, tricks me into thinking I'm making progress, but it gives me a certain level of belief that I'm going in the right direction. So later when I hit the mistake and my velocity slows down, I will have had a whole bunch of the problem under my belt by that point. Try to embrace dumb presentational components that get their universe from the outside. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, great answer. Thanks. Daniel also recommends reading the book by Robert Martin, also known as Uncle Bob,
Yep.
3 Laws of TDD. He says that it's a great read to get into the TDD mindset if you take it to heart and follow them as laws. What do you think? Have you read that?
I was hoping you wouldn't ask that. I know I should read it, but I haven't. Oh, I'm so bad. For something more specific to React and TypeScript in our web universe, I highly recommend egghead.io. I was one of the first paying customers. Every time I want to learn something, if they don't have a course on it, I decide it's probably not worth learning. And Kent Dodds, the creator of Testing Library, has a bunch of resources in there. He also has some, and these are video courses. And he also has some standalone things for the Zen of testing. So follow Kent Dodds, follow Egghead, and watch videos, because they produce these videos in a way that they're very careful with your time. They get right to the point.
Yeah, so actually it's not a book, so it's just an article. So
oh, okay. Good.
Yeah, good for you, good for everyone. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah. This afternoon, that's what I will be looking at. So thank you for pointing that out. All right, got anything else?
No, let's go on.
All right, let's go on. We have a heading. It's got a hardwired person or thing that we're saying hello to. Let's pass in, using props, the React machinery for information sharing between components. Let's pass in a recipient. And let's do this by making a failing test. So we're going to go over to our test. And here, when we make the heading, let's type recipient. And we'll say equals, and I'll do backtick world. Fail faster. I haven't hit save yet, so my tests haven't failed. I haven't stupidly gone over to the browser and looked in the browser console trying to decipher the mile-long traceback. I failed really fast on this because the IDE told me recipient is not part of the props information. So that's an easy thing to fix, and it's why we did this little gesture here. So we could come back on the generic and put in the props information, and recipient is a string. I haven't even hit saved yet, and my red squiggly went away. So that worked out pretty well, except if you have bunches of properties, this is going to become a long line. So that's where types or interfaces come in. I use interfaces, and so I could do, oh God, cut, paste, oh God, you see, I've got a red squiggly already, and then go type an interface, say heading oh my God, it's already killing me. Instead, what if the IDE could help you? I'm sitting in here, and I say extract to an interface. I'm going to say heading props. As a note, in front was a thing at the time that I wrote this tutorial. It's no longer considered a thing. In fact, the ESLint TypeScript stuff yells at you, I believe. It has a rule that the stylist will yell at you, maybe Pretty or something will yell at you if you put an I. So ignore the fact that I've got an I on here. So I start typing I heading prompts. When I'm done typing the name, I hit enter, and it saves the interface up top. I get one more chance to change the name on the other side here. I hit enter, and now I have strongly typed properties on my dumb presentational component. That's pretty cool. Now I need to use it. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to say curly bracket props dot. Oh, no, sorry. I got to put in props here. Sorry. Props are being passed to the arrow function from the functional component. So over here, I can now say props, and I get strong typing and autocomplete. So I hit enter. Save. And I fail because I'm passing in world. That's good because I know I've changed the UI, the interface. I change this to world, hit save. Let's see, heading. Oh, the one that's failing is in app, not heading. So this one is working correctly, so we're good. This is a reminder that we got to come back later. The third step of this refactoring is to fix the parent component after the container component after we do the dumb presentational component. Now, if you've got a big functional component and props.universe is getting old after a while, you can use an ES6 feature called destructuring. So I'm going to remove props there, and I'm going to destructure and say the only thing I want is recipient. And now I can use recipient without having to preface it with props.whatever. And let's see. This is the app test that's failing. Yep, the heading test is still good. All right, and so that's good. We're making progress. Now let's shut this thing up. The parent component is mad because why? Because we changed the interface. That's not what I wanted. This is why I should do symbols. App. Oh, smart. Red squiggly, failed faster. You have to supply a recipient. Well, what if I don't want to supply a recipient? What if I don't want to change the existing behavior? I want to have a default value. So I'm going to go back to my heading component, and I'm going to use ES6 destructuring to say, you know, if you want to, skip it, and I'll just assign React. And that's good. My test pass. We're all good, right? Maybe not so fast, because the type information doesn't know that there's a default value for recipient. Why does it not know that? Because my interface said you have to supply a recipient. It didn't say you should, it says you must. How do I have an optional property in an interface? Really simple, put a question mark on it, go back to app, and now the TypeScript compiler is happy. My test pass, that's all good. We're happy we have a default prop. We're going to see a little bit later in class-based props how that can become a little bit of a problem. All right, let's see. Scrolling down, point parent child. Type information. Sorry about that. So I've got my default prop. I'll go, in fact, I'll do the scrolling over here. We are in sharing props information. No, don't play the video. We just did the default prop. Talked a little bit more. We could go ahead and reload the app, see if we're all good. We're okay in the browser. I would like to stop, make a point, give a little pat on the back of TDD. We have done 99% of the development in this without looking at a browser. Because of TDD, because of WebStorm and the great visual testing integration, I don't look at some separate terminal. I get a nice integrated UI for testing. I'm running my tests in Node.js, and thanks to Jest, I'm using a simulated browser called JSDOM, so I don't have to fire up a browser. I'm living in my IDE. I'm doing all of this development in the flow without going over to a browser and clicking around, hoping everything works. I will pause there, take any questions.
Yeah, we actually don't have any questions. I think today you will be able to finish all the tutorial steps.
All right, good. Okay, so the next step is going to be class component. I'm going to I switched from a class component to a functional component. Now I'm switching back to a class-based component because the step after this is state. And we will have a stateful class-based component. In this step, though, we're basically going to recreate what we just did, a class-based component with a prop that's being passed in. But we're going to do a counter. And so just below this heading component, there will be a new component called a counter. So let me go back to WebStorm and get myself set up on my other window. Yep, I'm good. And this time I'm going to make a new file. As a note, that is the way I do navigation, is I turn off the breadcrumb thingy, the navigation bar thing, and I activate it with Command up, and then I move around and do my things. I don't use the project tool. I don't have this thing open all the time. So I've got a new place to write some tests. I'm going to go ahead and write this test by hand. Apologize. This counter component should render a counter. It's an arrow function. Oop. I should write a live template. We should do a live template for this, Ekaterina, to speed this up. Const wrapper equals shallow. I'm going to tab complete so it generates the import for me. And I'm going to point to something that doesn't exist. Okay. I'm going to make a new line, and I'm going to expect, remember, I'm writing a failing test first. And how should this test fail? Okay, that node that I just grabbed, I want to find a node on it that has a class of counter and has a child that is a label element. And I want to get the text off of it. Once I've grabbed the text, I expect, and I'll put a new line, I expect the text to be count. Okay. And I save and the test fails. That's good. Test failed. So let's go make, it test failed in a different way. I didn't add React as an import. So it can't find counter. That's good. Counter doesn't exist. So I'm going to go over to the left-hand side, and I'm going to make a new file called counter. New file called counter.tsx, where I'm going to implement it. I'm going to type this one from scratch as well. This is a class. It's going to be called counter. Look, I get an autocomplete already. Extends component. And when I hit enter, I get the import generated for me. It's going to have a render. And it's going to return. It's going to return. And I'm going to use emit. So I'm going to say div.counter with a label. And we'll say that is for the span count. And in here, I'm going to say count. Yeah, I know that the target doesn't exist yet, so I'm going to say span of 1. And I should have, let me do better emit. Span count of 1. All right. And I haven't imported React, so that's why I was missing some of the things. Let me get it. All right. Ooh. Oops. All right, and then I've got that class, and I want to do an export default counter. Remind me to follow up with you about that one, Ekaterina. The autocomplete generates a JSX node. All right, good. We're still failing. I expected to still fail because we've done the implementation, but we didn't import it. So now we've imported, red squiggly goes away, test passes, because I have a counter with a label child that has a text node of count, just as expected. If I change that to counter, my test would fail. Not a bad first step. Let's pass in a prop. Similar to what we just did for the heading, but this time using a class-based component. Same pattern, write a failing test, fix the counter presentation component, then go back to the parent component, the container component, and then fix it. So we will write a test in this new counter test file that tests that you can pass in a label for what should be displayed right there. The parent component can pass in the label. So with this test, pretend I just wrote it, has a custom label. Or actually, no, let me do this. I'm going to clone this with custom label. And I'm going to pass in label equals current. I failed faster, yay me, because of TypeScript. I didn't even have to run the test to fail. If I save it and the test run, oh, well, the test passed because it's all default values at the moment. If I put in current, like I should have, the test will fail. But TypeScript is telling me, hey, buddy, you're using this thing called label. It ain't on the interface. It isn't a prop that we are expecting to do. How do I do prop information on a class instead of a functional component? So I'm going to go here to the generic for component, and I'm going to extend it with label optional. I'll go ahead and do the optional part now, is a string. My red squiggly goes away, but I don't have a default prop yet for label. How do I do default? I can't do the ES6 destructuring thing with a default. I have to use a convention. The convention is a static field called default props. And I'm going to say label. Look, it does the autocomplete for me. Yay. Ooh. And if you don't pass in a label, like here, I'm not passing in a label, it will default to count. But if you do pass one in, it will use the one that you pass in. I'm not using the one that we're passing in yet, so I need to go get it. Good, I get autocomplete on my props because I put in type information. But I also want to do the thing where I make this into an interface because I might have too many props and that line will get really long. Let's do that same cool thing. Extract to interface. I want to call this I counter props. Hit enter again, and I'm in good shape. I'm passing in a prop. It has strong type information. If you omit it, it will use something called count. When I hit save, my test pass. Now, interesting, we'll see in a second about the use of the parent because we have the default prop. Things will continue to just work once we wire it in. So we've wired it into the UI. Let's go back to the app. And I'm going to go to symbol. And we want to put a new line here. And we want to say counter. Watch this. It did an autocomplete of everything it could find in my project. And when I hit tab, it generates the import for me. So it's not just built-in stuff, it's my own stuff that we can autocomplete and generate imports for. Now I'm going to say label, I'm going to say current. I'm going to go ahead and pass one in. When I hit save, goes through all the tests still pass. Got a lot of help from the IDE on that. But we don't really have a test for the parent component passing in a different value for counters. Let's go to app.test. We're on the parent component now. We have something about rendering the heading, and we're using mount to do a deep mounting of the component and all the child components. Let's change this to also see if we can find the counter label and see if we're getting the value that we passed in. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to duplicate it, and I'm going to say instead of the H1, go and find .counter label, and I expect it to be counter because that's what I'm passing in right there. Hit save. And let's see, I expected it to be counter, but it's not, it's current because that's what I passed in. My test failed, which is a good sign because it shouldn't have passed. All right, now my tests pass. Let's go over what we covered. We made a class component with props. We wrote a failing test before we implemented this child component. We added the feature to the child component to pass in a prop, and then we went back into the parent component, wired it in, and wrote a test to confirm that it was wired in correctly. You know what we didn't do? This. Never went to the browser. Did all of that work sitting in the IDE. I'll stop and take any questions.
Yeah, we still don't have any new questions.
Okay.
Do you still have many steps?
Let's see. I have this step and then the one step that I really wanted to get to.
Awesome. So we have 10 minutes left. I guess we should make it work this time. Yeah.
Right. More cutting and pasting on this one. Okay. So we just did class props. Let's now do class state, and I'll put this back up. And what we want is, in the next step, we'll wire up a handler, but we want to keep track of the counter. Every time you click, the counter goes up. So we're going to start with a failing test in counter.test.tsx. Actually, it won't fail. We currently have a 0 hardwired in. I'm going to go back to counter.test.tsx, and I want to go to the counter symbol. I'm going to add this test, save. And the test fails because we're expecting it to start at 0. It currently starts at 1. That's good that it fails, because now we need to go and do the implementation. In this interface, well, what we're about to do is model state. In the generic, the first argument is the props information. The second argument is the state, the type information about the component's state. So this time I'm going to write the interface first because I'm thinking about my state, and the state is going to have a count that is a number. Now that I've defined that interface, I can go add it to the generic. That's good. And I'll do a cut and paste for this. But I'm not using the state yet because this component doesn't have a constructor. So I added a constructor that said, you're going to pass me in some props to this component. Props are going to look like this. I'm going to call the super because that's what we have to do. And then I'm going to set the initial state with the count equal to 0. With this in place, I can come down to here and say this.state.count, hit save, and my test pass, because I have an interface modeling the component state. I'm saying that this component has this interface for the state. I'm setting up the state in the constructor, and I'm referring to the state down here. My test expected it to be 0. My TSX, JSX stuff returned the correct value. All in good shape. Let's say that as part of the contract, the parent controls what number you start at. Instead of 0, maybe you start at 10 or 20 or something like that. So let's write a failing test for this. And we're going to say that you can pass into the counter component, this thing, you can pass in a prop called start, and it's going to be a number, and that will be the expected starting point. Well, TypeScript helps us fail faster. Tells us exactly why we failed. There's no such thing as start. So let's come over to the interface for the counter props, the prop information. Let's add an optional value for start, and it's going to be a number. Then we need to add it to the default props, and using that strange React construct of a static member called default props, I'm going to say start at 0. So if you don't pass it in, because it's optional, we will start at 0. At this point, I haven't really changed too much of the interface, but I've already gotten to the point where the test fails because I'm passing something in. Oh, sorry, one other thing. I need to change this .state in the constructor to, instead of starting at 0, to start at props.start. So the initial state is what was passed in. So when the tests run, everything goes well. But what happened? This is where we have a couple of places where TypeScript does more than give you convenience. It caught something that you wouldn't have caught yourself. So what's going on here? I mouse over this. TypeScript tells me, well, this can be a number or it can be undefined. This props.start thing could be undefined because you put a question mark on it, and it might not exist. And this is a case where the machinery, the compiler machinery of TypeScript and interfaces doesn't know how to deal with this weird React runtimey thing of leave the special thing called default props lying around, I'll pick it up and I'll do the right thing. What's the solution to this? One of the first solutions to this is for you to say, hey, TypeScript, thanks for helping, but in this one case, don't help me so much. I definitely know what the assignment is on this. So I'm going to use the definite assignment assertion. And it tells the TypeScript compiler, don't worry about it. This is okay. I believe this might be considered the more normal thing these days. This was added sometime in the TypeScript 2 lifecycle, I think, to tell the compiler the right-hand side is going to specifically instruct the left-hand side about the value of this assignment. Don't go inferring it from the type information you get here. Just to be safe, I'm going to put that back to the definite assignment. And so we're all good. TypeScript is happy. Our tests are happy. One last step. We haven't wired it into the parent UI, the parent component. We've got app that has a counter, but we're not passing in a start. And in the test, we don't have a test that expects that. So what we could do is go ahead and add a line here. We're going to take this, we're going to add another assertion. This is in the mounted app component that says, okay, I'm not passing in to the span. I'm not passing into the component a value. So I expect it to be the default, and the default is 0. Again, where'd that default come from? It's the default prop starting point here, and the default prop is 0, so it's 0. I will stop there. Got any questions?
Yeah, so we have a question about the this list of tests in the test runner view, and how actually like you can work with that. So expand all the tests automatically, and or just keep all that like folded. Can you show different modes?
Sure. Good point. I should have done that because I've got it in the most noisy form possible right now. You can turn off passing tests. So you can only focus, so you focus on the failures. That's a good thing to start on. You can also, this is in watch mode, but sometimes I want to focus on one test. And so I go to that one test and I say run or even debug, which is what I showed in part 1. I can run just that one test. It's not running in the watch thing, so that if I make it fail, it's not going to rerun that test. It will rerun that other one because it's in watch. If I want these temporary run configurations that are created by this to get that, then I need to go to run, edit configurations, and I need to go to the template for jest. And if I put in the template -- watch or -- watch all, then all of my new tests will inherit that automatically. Is that a little bit about the different modes?
Yeah, and also the collapse and expand buttons,
sorry.
they actually should remember the state when you rerun tests. That's a
Yep.
note from myself.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and in fact,
and I
when
think
you
like
restart the
the
IDE, it will remember.
yeah, I think so. And I think one of the most like undiscovered and underrated features is that you can actually use quick search in this view, so you can just
Oh,
start
speed
typing the
search,
test.
yeah. So
Yeah,
I could
speed
just
search.
type
Yeah, I
ahead
love
of
that. Yeah,
Yep. That's a good
yeah,
point. I should have showed that.
yeah.
And needless to say, I'm over here and I'm in the app test, but if I double click on that line, it will open that file and put me on the line for that test. So that's a
Yeah.
pretty fast way to get to a test that you're interested in. For example, I'm interested in this one that failed, so I double click on it and it takes me to that one.
Yeah, right.
Okay, this is your call because you're the boss. We're at an hour. Do you want me to just talk about the next one or try to go through it?
Yeah, I think let's do that. Let's finish the last step.
Do you want to just
Hope
you want me
no
to just
one
talk
minds.
about it in the browser or actually do it?
Uh, yeah, up to you. I don't know,
It's
whatever
up to you.
works best.
Up to you. We still have a good number of people here.
Okay, let's go through that in the idea.
Great. All right. We are going to add a click handler. So when you click, the number goes up. First, we write a failing test. So I'm going to go back to counter.test.tsx. I'm going to add a test at the bottom that fails. And let me get am I in counter? Yeah, I'm in counter. Why does it fail? Well, first, let's look at what it's doing. It's finding the span and making sure, let me make this bigger. It's finding the span, making sure it starts at 0, and then after a click, we expect it to be 1. Well, what's this click thing? I don't have a browser around. Jest and JSDOM can do simulated browser events on a node, and then you pass information into simulate to say, for example, what kind of event you want generated. So in this case, what we expect is this node will start at 0. We're going to click on it, and we expect it to be 1. So how does that test work? It works poorly because we haven't implemented this yet. We expected to receive 1, and we got 0. So let's go implement the handler for this, the on-click handler. And I will skip kind of the intermediate step where it fails and we make it work again. So here's the handle click. And then I want an on-click handler. I'm going to put the on-click handler actually on the entire div. Remember, it's not a method. It's a field that is an arrow function so that it gets the correct this. Look at that, the test pass. That's really cool because otherwise I would have had to go over to a browser and click the universe, making sure everything worked. Now, we're not getting the type information that we expected to get. When this is called with the click, that's actually an event. Let's see how this adding type information may seem cumbersome for events, but it's worth it. So it's actually an event. My test still passed because I'm passing something in, but TypeScript says, hey, you cheated. You're using something without adding a type. And by default, you don't get that implicit anything turned on in the tsconfig file. Okay, shut up. Here's any. And now my event does fine. But that's not really that helpful. What is this event actually? It is a React mouse event. Moreover, it's a React mouse event on an HTML element. That's the event target. So now we get extra event information so that we can do things such as increment a counter. If you hit shift when you click, we want it to go ahead by 10, not by 1. I'm going to do a bug. I'm going to do a Pythonic version of a ternary. And I'm going to scratch my head about why I've got this thing wrong. My gosh, what is going on here? So what I'm saying is if shift is press, use 10. If this is true, use 10, otherwise use 1. This is JavaScript, not Python. I've got them backwards. And I'm a Python guy, so I'm like staring at this all day. What am I doing wrong? Well, let's see what TypeScript tells us. You can't do a plus between a number, this.state.count, and something that might be a Boolean. So I'm looking at this like, it's not a Boolean. It's either 10 or it's 1. You're dumb. This is a number. So great. I moved the TypeScript warning off of this line closer to the actual error, but it's still telling me what the problem is. Now when I look at it, I'm like, oh yeah, this is a Boolean. I know it's a Boolean because when I shift over it, when I command over it, TypeScript tells me it's a Boolean because I made that stupid mistake, and the ternary in JavaScript is actually like that. Now I can remove the number. Now I know that this is going to be a number. That mistake went away, and everybody's happy with this, but I don't really know. Sorry, everybody's happy except my tests fail because I'm expecting the event to have this information on it. So I need to go to this test and say, pass in extra information about the event. The event has a shift key. In this case, it's false. We're only advancing by 1. My test pass, I want to clone this test, make it fail. And I'm going to say true, and I expect it to be 10. Wow, my test pass. Let's see if this works. Will this actually work? Can I really go back to my browser at the end of all of this and actually expect it to work? I'm going to hold down Shift. And that's the end of our webinar. How about that? We actually came in 7 minutes too late, but we got to the part I wanted to talk about. There is a part after this talking about the connection between presentation components and their parent container components and passing in the handlers and the state from the parent to the child. It's interesting. I switched back to functional components. It is the better way to do these things so that your dumb components can be truly dumb. You can model in the TypeScript information interface that you're passing in a callable and it's going to return a void. Read through that. If you have any questions, let us know. I will stop here and see if we have any questions before we wrap up.
No questions. Sorry.
All right, great. I'm sure some of you will have some questions. I hope you have some questions or even some ideas about how I can teach this better when I come back and revisit the tutorial to get it up to date with the latest and greatest. All right, so let's go ahead and do the closeout part. Thanks everybody for spending time today with me and Ekaterina talking about React, TypeScript, some of these ideas about testing and failing faster, staying in the flow, letting the IDE help you, letting the TypeScript compiler give you a red squiggly so you don't even have to write a test to know that you made a mistake. If you have any of the questions later, don't hesitate to reach out to us by email or social media. If you'd like to get more information on WebStorm, please go to our website at jetbrains.com/WebStorm. We'd love your feedback on this webinar. So please reach out to us on Twitter or even better in the after webinar survey. We read those things carefully. The last survey had quite a number of, hey, Paul, remember to type a complete npm command to install the typing information instead of sitting around for 3 minutes until Ekaterina saved you. Please share your feedback in that survey so that we can do better the next time. And as a reminder, the recording will be made available on our YouTube channel soon. Check out our WebStorm blog where you can find up-to-date information about releases and events and places that we're going to be going to in 2020. In addition to educational resources. So for example, the recording of this webinar will be published on the blog in a few days. We'll also provide some additional links and information from the presentation on the blog. Before we close, Ekaterina, could you give us any updates on stuff that's coming up for WebStorm?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we have recently published a new major version, WebStorm 2019.3, so you can go to our website and read all about the new features in there. And yeah, so we plan the next major release for the end of March, and we are going to start the early access program for it at the end of January. That means that every week we will publish a free, fresh build with all the latest features we are working on. And yeah, you can download that, give it a try, share feedback with us, help us make WebStorm better. So at the moment, we are still finalizing our roadmap, and we hope to publish that soon in our blog. So stay tuned.
And it looks like we're going to be at NGConf in April, right?
Yeah, probably a couple of more conferences before that, still working on that.
All right, great. Thank you everyone for staying to the end, for participating with us today. Thanks for joining us, and hope you have a nice day.
Yeah, thanks. Bye.